Tonight on the Donlon Report, honoring our veterans and listening to their messages. Many of them are still dealing with the fallout of our exit from Afghanistan. We're going to talk with one of them about a poignant letter he wrote to President Biden about that. And we'll also talk with this veteran as well.
We're divided as a country, but I just feel like we would all be so much better if people just recognize the value of service to this country. I continue to believe in the promise of America, Adrian. I know that we are so much greater than the things that divide us.
That's our own Nick Smith this morning, live on our air. We're going to talk with him about his powerful message to America. Also, what's going on with the judge in the Rittenhouse case? 2 more outbursts today. Is he just a character, or is he jeopardizing the case? We'll get into that. Big night as we honor our veterans throughout the broadcast, including a very special American Snapshot for you, live from our Chicago studios. The Donlon Report starts right now. Good evening. Great to have you with us. We should listen to our veterans. They have been there, literally. And that's the pulse of America tonight. It takes a special kind of person to put their life on the line for a cause, an idea, our country. So when they talk, we listen. And coming up in a few minutes, we're going to listen to our friend Scott Mann, a Green Beret, Afghanistan veteran who has an important message for President Biden and all of us. Just because we left Afghanistan 72 days ago does not mean our veterans have fully abandoned the cause that remains. In a letter to the president, Colonel Mann writes this: after serving 22 years in the military during the longest war in American history, I've faced just about every leadership challenge imaginable. I've held fellow warriors in their final moments, escorted my fallen brothers home, and held their loved ones as they wept. But on this Veterans Day, with the collapse of Afghanistan, I have a leadership challenge I have never faced before. Our veterans have perspective that 99% of us will never have. That's right, just 1% will ever wear that uniform. They are a select few. They volunteer, they sacrifice. So when they say things like this, we should listen. Again, quoting Colonel Mann here. Mr. President, moral injuries are the worst of all, for they are injuries of the soul. You can help. You can have the power to do this. So what is it he wants from the president? We'll ask him. And another veteran we're going to listen to tonight in just a minute, our friend and NewsNation colleague, Nick Smith. He talks about how our veterans are an example for all of us, and that's something we can all unite behind. Listen to this from NewsNation's Morning in America earlier today. It got all of our attention.
There really is a shared camaraderie. When I tell you, Adrian, the most important thing I did was enlist in the military, because I tell you, Adrian, I know we're divided as a country, but I just feel like we would all be so much better if people just recognize the value of service to this country. I continue to believe in the promise of America, Adrian. I know that we are so much greater than the things that divide us, and these guys behind me are an example of that. I'm just going to send it back to you in the studio. Thank you.
Right. Beautifully said. Thank you so much. Oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah, how great is that, right? Certainly one of the best on-air moments of this young network. In fact, we were so excited about it, we thought we'd ask Nick if he could join us tonight. It's been a long day for you, my friend, but it's great to have you. Hey, it does not get much more real than that, right?
I didn't want to necessarily break down on morning TV and cry.
But you did.
Yeah, standing there talking to the guys, Joe, you and I talked off camera. These guys, they all have a story. Mm-hmm. Some of the guys had served in Vietnam, others had done, service since then. But they are a brotherhood. They've joined together and they just talk about their service in a space that's safe to do that.
Why do you think it was so emotional for you at that moment, Nick? What was it about it that brought that out?
I think meeting other guys who had served and the way I was immediately welcomed in. I hadn't met those guys until this morning, We called them to say, hey, we know that you're doing a Veterans Day celebration and we'd like to be a part of it. And they said, come on down. They immediately asked me about my service, talked about my time at Fort Jackson. One of the other guys had also done his basic training at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. So it all became this kinship almost immediately.
The thing about it, there are several things that are about it that are great, but the thing that I really loved about it was that it kind of snuck up on you. It seemed to me like you weren't expecting that to happen.
At all. Joe, real talk. If I had known that, I definitely would have, said, because, the deal is you don't want to lose composure on TV. Mm-hmm. I do this for a living, but there are times when just the real emotion just creeps in. Joe, I talk about my mom, My mom was a single mom. So my mother worked so hard to just make sure that I had every opportunity available to me. Finished high school early, decided to join the military because I really didn't know what it is I wanted to do. Military helped me figure that out, helped me figure out my next steps. I used my GI Bill for college. Joe, it changed my life.
Yeah, I think this also gave us a look into sort of what this was today, was sort of this multi-generational hug, I guess, right? I mean, you clearly felt a connection with these guys. If you'd been in the studio, I'm not sure you'd have had that reaction. It was because you were with them. But what is it that you guys feel that the rest of us don't?
I think what it is that we all know that deep down, that decision to serve changes you. You may not even be aware that it will change you when you enlist, when you sign up, or if you decide to do ROTC. There's something about leaving home, finding others to bond with who become your brothers, shared in uniform, shared in service, shared in commitment, shared in oath, that you meet people from all walks of life. Joe, I think one of the biggest challenges, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, I just wish that more people knew the value of service.
Why don't you think more?
Joe, I think that, there are just, because everyone's not required to serve, right? And I think that there are those who feel as though, unfortunately, that those of us who enlist are not necessarily having an option to do other things. I think that there are those who feel as though, just go to college, do the other things. I'm here to tell you that I think that there are life lessons that can be learned in military service and active duty enlistment that can be life-changing.
Absolutely. In fact, you talk about that earlier in this live report you did this morning. I want to play another small clip for our audience, and we'll talk about it after.
We served our country. We love our country. Somebody asked me the other day, and even today, would we all do it again? Everyone standing behind me would do that same thing and do it all over without even thinking about it.
Look at everybody shaking their heads. You think we're lacking this desire to serve now?
I think we're lacking that desire to serve because people just don't know. And we don't constantly reiterate the value of. And unfortunately, we see instances, we've done the reporting, where so many of our men and women come back and they don't necessarily feel supported. I think that more needs to be done to change that. And I think that unfortunately, so many things have become political that people don't always talk about. Why it's important that we talk to different communities, why we engage different people about that value of service. So when I have an opportunity to share my story, Joe, make no mistake, I always do.
Well, you did this morning, and it was fantastic.
Well, thank you.
And you started at 4 a.m. Thanks for sticking around for us. It's good to see you. Good Morning in America. You'll see Nick Smith. Thanks for the time, Nick.
Thank you.
Let's bring in another veteran now, one of our good friends. He just wrote a letter to President Biden on America's exit from Afghanistan. Lieutenant Colonel Scott Mann joins us now. Colonel, first of all, happy Veterans Day. You know, it's always a pleasure for us to have you. Before we get to that letter, I want to ask you what you just heard from Nick there and get some of your thoughts on what he said. What kind of person do you think it takes to be willing to serve and make this sacrifice in service of something much bigger?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I tell you, I was so listening to Nick just now. I just made my night. I think what it takes is a person who loves their country, who's willing to serve a purpose bigger than themselves. I actually wrote a play about the war called Last Out, Elegy of the Green Beret, and we're performing it. It's on film right now, lastoutfilm.com. And it shows the power of service, and it's all veterans in it. I hope people will watch it because it does what Nick says. It shows the value of service through storytelling, and that's what this country needs.
It's also played a key role, hasn't it, Colonel, in helping veterans when they come back. It's helping them heal and helping them recover.
Absolutely. Storytelling is what societies have been using for thousands of years to transition home. And when Nick said, whenever I have a chance to tell my story, I do. That's what our nonprofit teaches. The Hero's Journey is helping warriors find their voice and tell their story. And our film, lastoutfilm.com, it does that. It tells the story of Afghanistan and service, the military family, in a way that's never been told by the people who lived it. And again, I hope people will invest this Veterans Day learning about that because the country needs it bad.
Let's talk about your letter to the president, Colonel. You started with, Mr. President, I need your help. And you write about a friend of yours named John who can't let go of our withdrawal from Afghanistan, and he's still working tirelessly to get our allies out. You tie it beautifully to your friend not being able to put down the phone. Explain to our viewers why you wrote this.
Well, imagine a 911 dispatcher, Joe, being on an 85-day 911 call. But before they pick up the phone, the supervisor says, hey, we're not sending anybody to the address, so just do the best you can and keep their hopes up. That's exactly what our veterans have been doing since Afghanistan fell. They've been on the phones with their partners trying to keep them alive, trying to keep their morale up. No second shift, no relief. They've been re-traumatized, re-triggered, and they walked into that breach, Joe, for one reason, because nobody else did. And that's what veterans have always done, and it's what they'll always do. But if we don't relieve them of this watch, we are in for a serious moral injury and mental health issue in this nation.
Have you heard back from the White House? Do you expect to?
I haven't. I hope to. I would very much like to talk to the president about the sacrifice and contributions that our volunteer veterans are making right now in the absence of institutional leadership that should be doing this. There's a way to work together on it, but we're not doing it right now. And this moral injury doesn't just affect veterans, Joe, it affects the entire nation.
The thing that stood out to me, and I was sort of almost waiting for it, Colonel, when I read your letter, was when you talked about your friend considering suicide. Is there a way for you to explain, maybe to a non-veteran, the mental health toll serving takes and how veterans deal with that and what you've been through and what you've seen?
These men and women have done so much, and they've asked for nothing in return. For 20 years, they fought a war in the shadows. And in the last few months, they've stepped into the breach again and asked for nothing in return. The impact that it is taking on them, watching their partners, their allies be hunted and killed and freeze to death, no human should have to watch, certainly not from their kitchen table while their children are eating breakfast. And we can do better.
Well, listen, on the way out here, Colonel, let me just, I know you hear it a lot, but thank you for your service. And beyond that, I want to thank you for all that you've done for this broadcast, because it has been invaluable to have your voice and your insight. And as we've gone through this whole journey on the way out of Afghanistan, your participation has made us all smarter, and I thank you for it.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks to Nick. LastOutFilm.com. We need to heal and inform this Veterans Day weekend.
All right, take care, sir.
Thank you.
LeBron James calling out Kyle Rittenhouse for crying on the stand, saying he doesn't believe the tears were real. A lot of opinions about that we're going to discuss coming up. Plus this.
Over 3 months ago.
I don't want to, you know what? I don't want to get into it.
All right, a lot of debate over the actions of the judge in this case, his outbursts in particular. 2 more examples today. We're going to play those for you and ask our top prosecutor, is he jeopardizing the case? Don't forget, you can follow us on social media at the Donlon Report on Twitter. The defense has rested in the trial of Kyle Rittenhouse, and as the trial winds down, perhaps an unexpected player is front and center in the headlines. Judge Bruce Schroeder has been a little out of the ordinary from the beginning. Yesterday, he lashed out at the prosecutor, and today had the jury applaud the veterans in the courtroom. There was only one there, though, and it was the defense witness who was about to take the stand. That's the first clip of several we're about to show you now.
Oh, I wanted to just observe that it's Veterans Day. And any veterans in the room, on the jury or anywhere else? Oh, Dr. Black is what branch?
Army, sir.
Okay, and I think we give a round of applause to the people who've served our country. I was astonished when you began your examination by commenting on the defendant's post-arrest silence. Not to be confused, for 400 on the menu, scallops are shellfish, and these are immature or green onions.
All right, yeah, so they were playing Jeopardy at one point as well. So Pat Brady, our former federal and state prosecutor we lean on for legal issues, is with us now. How unconventional is all this? You're chuckling during this.
No, because I'm chuckling because having been in a lot of particularly state courts, there are a lot of goofball judges. I mean, a lot. We had one, we used to call him Judge Pigpen, and he slept in his chambers. But you know what? He was a good judge. Yeah. So all his goofiness and quirkiness doesn't matter unless he's doing things or making rulings that are really detrimental, in this case, to the defense.
Well, that's the question. Is that happening here? Because yesterday he really went after the prosecutor. What did you make of that?
Well, first of all, the thing he was going after the prosecutor for, it was probably a legit exercise.
It was
yeah,
legit.
because he was arguably commenting on the fact that the defendant was silent when he was post-arrest, which is like prosecution 101. You cannot comment on a defendant's silence. That's in the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution. So you had a right to be mad there. But I think the bigger point is it's at the prosecution. Remember, prosecution doesn't get an appeal. This is their one bite at the apple. It's worse if they're doing this to the defense. If they're making if they're siding with the prosecution, I think that's more problematic.
So the defense could appeal based on the judge's, actions after, if in fact he's found guilty.
And in this case, the defense is probably happy with what he's doing. When you ask a veteran to stand up and be recognized and then put him on the stand, that's a pretty good day for you. But that's where you might cross the line too. He's not supposed to show any bias. He's supposed to be an impartial judge. Every witness is, the jury's there to assess their credibility, and you don't prop them up before they get on the stand. Quickly,
the mistrial situation. Where do we stand on that?
Well, they filed the motion for mistrial based on those two things that happened yesterday, and that motion can be heard at any time. There's an outside chance it might be heard before they do closing arguments on Monday, but it maybe will come up again if there's a conviction on a motion for new trial. But if we don't hear about it before the closings, it's not going to happen.
You think it's unlikely, yeah. So everyone's talking about whether...
I think it's unlikely, even given the facts that he's going to declare a mistrial. They don't like to declare mistrials. Right. They like to have the jurors get the evidence. And there's a curative instruction you could give, too, on what happened. I'm not getting into the weeds too much. So I think that's probably not going to happen.
So everyone talking about whether this reaction from Kyle Rittenhouse we saw was real or whether it was theatrics. Even LeBron James has weighed in on this now with a tweet where he said, "What tears?" This is another example, Pat, of something that's divided us. People are watching this differently. You didn't think, you told me today, that they should have even put him on the stand.
Well, I think that's a tough call. And the more I looked at it, maybe they're going for the whole ball of wax. They're going for an acquittal that he was actually justified. He was acting in self-defense. Typically, when a defendant hits a stand, 90% of the time, it's bad for the defense. It's kind of a Hail Mary, then they don't. In this case, the defense was able to make a lot of its case through the prosecution's case, and they put him on. Again, I think they're doing it because they think they can win the whole thing. I don't, what? People get up and testify. I've testified before. It's very difficult. Yeah. This young man's life is right in front of him right now. So whatever emotion she shows or not, I don't think anybody can judge him on that. They have to look at the facts.
And how the jury perceived it. That's the only thing.
Yeah, that's all that matters.
So we called this a bombshell, Pat, when he said it, but one of the key witnesses is now walking back what he said in court in front of the jury about whether he pointed the gun at Rittenhouse before Rittenhouse shot him. Here's a clip of what he said in the interview today.
So you're saying that you actually you weren't pointing your gun at him. Is that what you're saying?
That's absolutely what I'm saying, yes.
So what's the key in this case, Pat? I mean, the jury didn't hear that, obviously. What do you think when they go into that jury room, what's the question?
Well, they're not going to know that, right? I assume that they're not going to know that what the statement was made. No. That's going to be subject. That'll be a motion at the end of this trial on both sides. I'm not sure actually what the outcome of this is. It's not good. I don't know why he would go on and do this or why this would happen. But
big picture of the trial, though, overall, when the jury goes into the room, what's the question? What does this come down to?
Very simple. This is not a whodunit. We know he killed these two people and fired these other shots. It's whether or not he believed, and it was reasonable in his belief, that he was acting in self-defense, meaning that he was in threat of imminent harm or death to himself. So it's a straight-up self-defense case. And so it's very simple. There's no DNA here. Did he shoot him, and what was he thinking when he did it? So all these factors we just talked about go into that.
And closing arguments on Monday, you said, right?
Yeah, it should be interesting.
All right. Pat Brady, always good to have you. Thanks. Let's continue more. Now on this, I want to bring in business owner from Kenosha, Scott Carpenter, owner of B&L Office Furniture, and get his perspective. Scott, it's great to have you. Thanks for the time. I appreciate it. Give us a sense of the mood there on the streets in Kenosha. Now that this trial's winding down, your business was burned to the ground last August. Are you worried that after this verdict there might be some trouble?
You know, it's a possibility. It definitely could happen. I hope that it doesn't happen. I hope that we learn from what happened last year, didn't solve anything, burning down businesses and destroying people's lives and properties and taking lives, solved absolutely nothing at all.
Yeah.
It didn't help anything. It quieted the whole meaning down.
Are people focused on the trial, Scott, and this eventual verdict, or is this still really, as you said, just about as much of what happened to your city last summer?
No, there's a lot of people talking about it. Business owners, it's a big conversation. A lot of people on the fence. Nobody really knows what to expect or really what side to take with it, and just want to see what's going to happen next.
Yeah. What do you remember about that night, Scott? I know your business, as we mentioned, burned to the ground. You'd been in business 40 years, and you're in your brand new location right now. You rebuilt. But what do you remember most about what happened last August?
Oh, you know, when I think back to it, it was a very scary scene going downtown to where our business was, and the crowds of people that were just just going by, like as if it was like a tourist city, and it was just devastation. It was really scary. I was afraid to be on the streets during the daytime. It was rather frightening. And then it got real when unfortunately people died on the streets.
Yeah. How is the city today, Scott, a year later? Do you feel like, I know you've been able to rebuild there and reopen, do you think things are coming back now a year later?
Yeah, I believe they are. You know, obviously the boards are now down. It took till after winter before that happened, and there was still some uneasiness throughout the summer. Businesses coming back, obviously, you got that dark cloud of COVID hanging over our heads,
right,
keeping, you know, people at home. But, you know, there's a lot of small businesses in Kenosha. You know, there's not a lot of big business and a lot of self-proprietorship, and we're making it work. You know, they're doing what we're doing. Just keep going at it.
Right. You know, I have to wonder what you thought living in Kenosha, Wisconsin. This isn't the kind of stuff that happens, right, in Kenosha. It's not something you expect, right?
No.
What is your takeaway a year later?
You know, society in itself it doesn't happen here. Rioting was never an issue here. And what's going with society? What's happening? Why are we fighting the way that we are and really not reaching any resolution to anything? It's just we put a Band-Aid on it and then we wait for the next bomb to blow up. You know, I don't know what to think of it, but it's really scary. We need to work together and come together to resolve these issues and not blow up. There's better ways of doing things than burning down people's towns and neighborhoods and shooting one another.
That is fantastic perspective. Scott Carpenter, owner of B&L Office Furniture, we wish you all the best in your new location there in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Thanks for stopping by.
Thanks, sir.
Corporate America balking at the president's Build Back Better plan, saying there are hidden costs in it that make it more expensive. Add in inflation, and what are the chances this thing's going to pass? Our panel debates that ahead. If you're doing a double take, looking at your latest grocery tab, it's for good reason. Prices from the food aisles to the gas pumps are rising. Top economic officials say it's temporary, but you're feeling the squeeze for sure just ahead of the holidays. New government data says prices have skyrocketed over the past year, rising more than 6%. That's the biggest increase in 31 years. Another report from the Labor Department said average hourly wages went up in October, but they were outpaced by these rising prices we're telling you about as Americans plan their holiday spending. Here to talk more about this is our friend, business reporter Shivani Joshi. Shivani, we were wondering today if we're repeating history here a little bit, but the big question is, how do we fix it?
That's a big question, Joe, and everybody is out there wondering whether or not this is temporary, because that is really what the question that the Fed and experts and Wall Streeters are trying to deliberate. If this is a temporary issue, there really is not a lot to do. It's a whole lot of wait and see. But the issue is, if we believe that this is going to be a 2022 problem and beyond, there are a whole lot of things we need to be considering.
Do you think it is?
You know, experts out there including the CEO of UPS and the people out there on the front lines are saying this is a 2022, maybe a 2023 problem. That being said, that does not lessen the impact that many Americans are out there facing. We've got gas prices. I was on here a few weeks ago telling you about the sticker shock I faced at the pump in California. Egg prices, milk prices. I mean, it's a long haul between 22 and 23 that could put pressure on everyday Americans.
Yeah, I mentioned we kind of went into the Wayback Machine here, Shivani, which I'm guessing is before your time, but we were talking about Gerald Ford and the old win buttons, you know, whip inflation now. There was President Carter who talked about, you know, turning down your thermostat to try to conserve energy. And then the last time we said this happened was in 1990, which I think lasted for a couple of years. But remind us how we got out of these in the past.
Well, there's a lot of inflationary tools and technical tools that you can do, and that's all relies on Fed monetary policy. This is the number one lever that the Fed has, and the number one job that the Fed has is to temper monetary policy. And the way that it does that is by impacting the Fed rate, and that affects the cost of borrowing, the money supply that's out there, that eventually impacts the cost of getting a credit card, how much you pay for a car loan. It basically slows and reduces the monetary supply that's out there. And that is the big lever that we have not seen the Fed use up until now, which we believe it's going to use in 2022. We just don't know when they're going to do it.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, though, when they do try to pull this lever you're talking about, Shivani, how far do they pull it? I know it's hard for you to guess, but what would we expect? Let's say this goes into 22 or 23. Where might interest rates be?
Well, the last time we saw the Fed do this, they did it incrementally and did it over a number of years, 4 to 6 years, incrementally increasing it 0.25%, 0.5%. And my guess is they're going to do something similar to that, because anything that is drastic, Joe, you wouldn't want to see happen to the economy, because it could cause sort of a sudden shock to the system. So what you want to see the Fed do, if it is going to increase rates, is do it gradually so that the economy has a time to react to it, so you don't see any major whiplash effect. And that is something that is consistent with how it has instituted interest rate increases in the past.
Is this all because of the supply chain issues, and is that just a big part of it?
Well, that is one part of it, and it is a huge part of it, Joe, and that's why people believe that this is a temporary issue. If this is just a supply chain issue, things will get back to normal in 2022, 2023. And so we don't want to add all of these extra factors on top that will stress the economy out. So this is what the wait-and-see approach is all about. Now, the other things we need to consider, are we going to see economic growth stall? Are we going to see wages impacted? Are we going to see productivity impacted? All of these factors factor into whether or not we're going to have a recession or an inflationary environment. Everything is being considered and weighed right now, but most people believe that the supply chain issue is the largest one that's out there, and that is why the Fed is waiting.
Let's get you quickly, Shivani, on these vaccine mandates for companies with more than 100 businesses are warning now it'll do irreparable harm if this goes forward. Do you agree?
You know, I am torn on this, Joe, because I do see the benefits. I'm a business reporter. I'm looking at what's happening to the economy in an environment where we have businesses that want to grow. We have a record number of job openings, labor participation at low rates. And what they're trying to do, businesses are trying to do, is get their businesses going. We've got this legislation now that is putting pressure on employees to start testing and vaccinating their employees. Right. At what cost, though, right? So we have this the different cost-benefit analysis. We want people working. We want people back to work. We want the economy restarted. But we also have to take these health considerations that could cost, employers and health insurance companies tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars as well. There's a lot that they're weighing. Right.
Something to keep an eye on, and we all will. January 4th is the deadline, at least as of now. Yeah. Shivani Joshi, great to have you as always. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tonight, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is accusing Democrats of hiding a lot of spending in President Biden's Build Back Better plan. It's also cautioning lawmakers against voting on the package without knowing its true cost. In a letter sent to every member of Congress, the chamber said, "We have the highest inflation in 31 years. Employers are struggling to fill a record number of job openings, and the current draft of the reconciliation bill uses gimmicks to cover up well over $1 trillion in spending. It would be the height of irresponsibility for members of Congress to vote on this multi-trillion-dollar tax and spend bill with no clear understanding of its true cost or the real-world impact of the policies." I want to bring in now former Democratic State Representative for Georgia, Dee Dawkins-Hagler, and senior political analyst for the Independent Women's Forum, Carrie Sheffield. Great to have you both. Been a while since we've seen you, Dee. It's good to have you back. Are you worried that things like this and Joe Manchin's concern about inflation, does this give lawmakers pause, and is this plan in trouble?
Well, first of all, it's good to be back. And I don't think that the plan is in trouble. I just think that we need to be able to explain it better. Inflation is expected. We have to understand that we've never been in a pandemic, and so things have really changed. And so as a result, we are looking at inflation. However, I think that the Democratic Party has to get on top of their messaging to make sure that the American people understand what's going on, as well as many members in Congress. Believe it or not, some people actually do not read the bills that are in front of them.
Yeah. Carrie, the president is trying to describe it and explain it. He said in a statement today, 17 Nobel Prize winners in economics have said that my plan will ease inflationary pressures. This is why progressives wanted these two packages tied together. I can sort of feel the leverage that they had slipping away. Does it seem that way to you? Because Congressman Tom Reed told us last week he's a hard no. What's the fate of this bill, you think?
I think it is a hard no. Look, you can put lipstick on a pig, but at the end of the day, it's still a pig. You could try to package up this and put a bow on it however you want for the holidays, but it's still a package that is dangerous, and it's going to hurt the American people. Look, one of the big factors for inflation, one of the top costs is energy. And what is Biden doing to help increase the domestic energy supply? Oh, let's think about it. He's canceling the Keystone Pipeline. He's not allowing drilling on, land leases for federal land. I mean, he's doing everything he can to hurt the American consumer and increase gas prices. That's one of the top problems with inflation, why people are feeling the pinch. And so Senator Manchin is absolutely right about this specific bill. He said that with the inflation, at this point, it is not temporary. We need to just hold your horses. Let's wait and see. But there was a really good estimate, though, as to the cost from the University of Pennsylvania, Wharton, and they estimated that once you exclude all the gimmicks, it was a good word, gimmicks, that the Chamber of Commerce said, exclude the gimmicks, it's actually a $4 trillion price tag. We don't need this with inflation right now.
Dee, it seems like you got a lot of headwinds on this. How do you overcome it despite the messaging? Do you think you have the votes?
Well, first of all, I do think he's going to have the votes because look at it. If we do nothing, we'll be in a worse situation than we are right now. And let's just be honest. The Keystone Pipeline, we had issues with that even when Barack Obama was president. And we saw one of the greatest economies that we have ever had in the United States that trickled over into the Trump presidency. So let's use honest statistics. We'll be having dialogue right now. So let's just talk about this. Yes, energy prices are high, but let's just look at it across the world, across the globe. People are suffering. Inflation is high, and we are all upside down, all because of a global pandemic. Usually you have inflation, but you don't have it coupled with being crippled coming out of a pandemic.
Well, we'll see, because as you said, there's certainly the argument being made that this will help. Kerry, I want to get you on one more thing. Meantime, we're talking about the infrastructure bill, which 13 Republicans voted for, and now former Chief of Staff Mark Meadows says those 13 who voted for it should lose their committee assignments. What happened to the bipartisan infrastructure bill?
Well, there are also 6 Democrats who voted against it as well, so there was bipartisan objection to this bill as well. The bill had such a tiny, tiny little portion that actually had infrastructure, and so that's why a lot of people were upset, because there's more pork than actual substance, more fat than actual meat. And so we opposed the bill at the Independent Women's Forum because we said that this is, again, going to cause more inflation. It's going to put more debt on the future generations, and it's kicking the can down the road. Our debt to GDP ratio is of 125%. That is an astronomical. We're approaching $30 trillion in U.S. debt. I mean, my generation, our children's generations, this is going to be on their backs. This is irresponsible. And so I totally understand where he's coming from. All right, Dee Dawkins-Hagler and Carrie Sheffield, great to have you. Thanks for coming by.
Thank you.
A 9th person has died in the Astroworld tragedy. And up next, we're going to hear from Steve Wilkos, who has spent his career dealing with crowd control issues. How could this have been prevented? Another person has died of their injuries following the Astroworld Festival tragedy last weekend in Houston, Texas. That brings the total death toll now from that music festival to 9, all between the ages of 14 and 27. We've asked the question, how did this happen? A lot of people have. And who should be held accountable? Joining me now for the latest on that, NewsNation's Brian N. Brian?
Yeah, Joe, death toll now at 9. These stories are just so sad. The latest victim is a 22-year-old woman named Bharti Shahani. She was at the music festival behind me with her family. She's a college student. She's a computer science major. This was the first music festival she had ever been to. She was with her sister and her cousin in the crowd when they say she was basically trampled and suffocated. She was unresponsive. She had 2 heart attacks on the way to the hospital. She was on a ventilator for 5 days before she was pronounced dead yesterday evening. As you can imagine, this is such a heartbreaking time for her family, especially her mother. Listen to what her mom told us this afternoon.
What happened now? What happened to my blessing now? I want my baby back, you know? I won't be able to live without her. It's like, it's impossible. You know what I'm saying? I'm empty here.
So sad to be there in that room, see what that family is going through right now, Joe. Obviously missing their daughter, but also they were very clear. They want justice. They want people to be held accountable for this tragedy.
Wow. All right, that was really powerful indeed, and seeing those pictures certainly makes it sink in. Brian Enton, thank you for the update live for us tonight in Houston. Joining us now for more, host of the Steve Wilkos Show and former security guard for Jerry Springer, Steve Wilkos. Steve, let's start with just what your observations are about this. You've had a little while to digest it all. What went wrong here?
Well, I just think anytime when you have, it almost seems like encouragement, right? That when I'm reading about these Travis Scott concerts, it kind of eggs on mayhem, which, you know, it's almost unbelievable that this happened after there's been incidents in the past at these concerts. And what's terrifying for me is my daughter went to one of his concerts. But with this crowd control, I think after all these past incidents, like when they talk about the Who back in the 70s and now this Travis Scott, I can't believe that there's not more physical barriers in these large floor spaces where it moves people to the side and you won't have this onrush and crush of people. I just can't believe that there's just thousands of people that can just rush the stage.
Yeah, if you have 50,000 people in a space like this, Steve, is there a rule number one in crowd control?
You know, like I said, there has to be physical barriers. Like if you go to Yankee Stadium, not everybody's going to be able to get down to that lower level, down to those seats closest to the field. And I think you have to have that same concept in these concerts where only so many people can get down to a lower level, down to the stage. There has to be permanent physical barriers to break up these large numbers of people all in one spot. And, you know, I'm reading all kind of things that somebody's going around injecting drugs and maybe that started the stampede. And maybe there needs to be more physical security spread out through that crowd. But I definitely think you can't just have one wide open space where everybody can just rush the stage.
Right. And I'm assuming, too, ways to get out for these people. You know, you brought up the Yankees, Steve. We were wondering about this today. If you were to go to a World Series game at Yankee Stadium, I don't know how much the Yankees are responsible for the security. Maybe you do, but it's more NYPD. When you have these kinds of events, I know police are short-staffed and they have a lot going on, and there are a lot of these events, but should cities have more of a role in providing the security at these things?
Well, most of the police officers that work these events, even I think at Yankee Stadium, I believe they're off duty.
Off duty, sure. That moonlight, yeah.
Right. So I think maybe you need to hire more, right? And listen, I do think that this is kind of foreseeable. I'm not a Travis Scott fan. I don't follow, young people's music and concert goings and stuff like that. But what I've been reading is that these incidents seem to happen a lot at his concert. So, I would think that even somebody of his stature has somebody that would have like audience crowd control. That it seems like they go into this and it's very blindly that there isn't a plan. What I'm reading is that the paramedics were, very poorly trained. They didn't even know how to perform CPR. Right. So that's what I'm just saying. With these other events that I've been to, you have a certain ticket and you're only allowed in a certain area. But with these concerts, it doesn't seem like that's the case, that you get into this, you have a ticket, and then you could basically, if you wanted to, you could push your way all the way up to the edge of the stage, which I think that's, and when I'm hearing that mother talk about losing her daughter, it's terrifying, it's heartbreaking.
It is, it's crushing. And, like you, I've sent our kids off to concerts like this as well. I don't know that you ever said anything to your daughter about the dangers of this. I know I didn't, but I know we probably both will for sure moving forward. Yeah. Steve, it's great to have you. Yeah, thanks again.
For having me again, Joel.
You bet. Take care. We'll see you soon. On Balance with Leland Vittert starts at the top of the hour, and he joins us here on set with more on what's ahead. What do you got?
Hey, rule number one in politics, right? When your enemy is self-destructing, buy some popcorn, sit back and watch. Let them do it. Whatever you do, don't get in the way. Republicans cannot seem to figure that out. We're going to talk to one Republican who is now talking about punishing the 13 Republicans who voted for yes on infrastructure rather than focusing on everything else, what that means for the media narrative, and then also talking about the GOP senators who voted yes as well.
All right. More at the top of the hour. It's On Balance with Leland Vitti. See you then. On this Veterans Day, we want to share another tribute, this one from my hometown, St. Louis. Elementary students honored veterans with a drive-by parade in the school's parking lot. 400 students lined up and waved flags as veterans with ties to the school drove through. Some of the kids saluted, others held signs with their loved ones' names as all the kids cheered for them. Certainly nothing like a real-life history lesson and a lesson in respect and appreciation. Great to see. In our Special American Snapshot tonight, almost everyone knows a veteran, and our team here at the Donlon Report certainly no exception. I had two grandfathers and a father-in-law who served. Let's start out with some pictures, and we begin with our executive producer, Justin Monato's brother, Christian Monato. He served in the United States Marine Corps as Lance Corporal in the 90s. Boy, you know those two probably had some throwdowns, right? United States Air Force retired Master Sergeant Derek Mayo. He's our booking producer, Alvina Alston's brother-in-law. Served for 24 years, completing 3 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, and has some pretty impressive pictures to show for it. Segment producer Nick Fiducia's uncle, Tony Goldman, served in the U.S. Marine Corps. That picture with him on the right, taken in Afghanistan. Our segment producer, Emily Lambert's grandfather, Valens Adrian Mador, on the left, served in the U.S. Air Force. Her uncle, Joseph Patterson, in the middle there, served in the U.S. Army. Her grandpa, Richard Patterson, on the right, served in the United States Army as well. Assistant producer Christine Jenkinson's sister, Nicole Jenkinson, served in the U.S. Army, studying as an intelligence analyst. God bless the veterans, and all of those veterans out there, we salute you tonight. And we thank you for joining us each and every night here on the Donlon Report. Time for us now to hand it over to Leland Vitti. He's next with On Balance. Thank you for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.